All right, so I don't want to spend the whole time on big data, little data. What I do want to spend a lot of time on is our insights, because the common complaint that we hear from primarily decision makers slash executives is they are getting inundated with reporting, right? Whether it comes right off, the end of a Google account or Omniture or whatever it might be. But can you guys give me some examples of where you've had some sort of transformative experience, where you've moved from report to insight, and all of a sudden you gave an executive some sort of delightful experience they never knew was possible? A. Or B, if that hasn't happened, is it the executive's job to find the insights? Anybody want to take it on a little bit?
Everyone's looking at me. All right, I'll go first.
You haven't spoken very much, so.
Yeah, all right, that's fair.
You always.
All right, so I think it is, I think everyone in the company who touches the data has a responsibility to make it actionable, regardless of if you're an executive, the CEO, whatever. One of the things we spend a lot of time on is trying to take the data and obviously make it more actionable, and one way we've had some success around that is using data visualization. So taking that data, putting it in a format that people can digest it, so that they can take action on it and make decisions and ask a lot of questions around it. When we think about a commerce experience, again, showing my bias, we think a lot about predictive analytics around what other people have done and start to use that data to code into the system to allow that the commerce experience is smart enough to adapt to the consumer's experience, therefore making the heavy lifting on the machine versus inside of the executive having to make decisions around merchandising. So in the future world, if anyone is a merchant, they should really be worried about their job, because ultimately the machine and the computing power around big data should drive what exactly Andrew's going to want to buy and how he's going to want to consume the product. We have enough info on consumers to know that.
So in Digital River's case, you're the closest to the transaction, right?
Correct.
And so that also means you could be closest to the data.
Yep.
In fact, closer than your own customers, oftentimes.
We are, absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
So what is their expectations of you as an e-commerce vendor to tell them, hey, guess what? We found this new high-performing segment, and that needs to float all the way up through your marketing and however else you're, all the way through television advertising.
Yep, absolutely. So they look to us for some of those Uber trends that kind of exist outside of just the world that they live in. And so we have a broader look at the market, and we can start to tell them best practices and things that are happening outside of their purview. One of the examples that we do a lot of multivariate testing to understand consumer experience as to what actually converts better. And we're seeing tests that have different success based on country location. And so we're doing tests now that don't perform in the Southwest, that do perform in the Northeast. And so we start to use that data to actually show different consumer experiences based on where you are. And they're not necessarily price related. It could be the location of the buttons, the journalistic merchandising we use inside of the experience. All of those different things have a little bit of a toll to pay in the conversion of a consumer. So we're using that data. Again, it doesn't really answer your original question around kind of data analytics and how we roll up executive summaries to make actionable data. Our answer to that is really trying to make the systems do as much of the heavy lifting as possible, and then we react to that data.
Leaving you more brain power to actually interpret what's going on.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Anybody else have sort of like good storytelling advice? Like how do you turn this in, like whether it's data visualization, right?
Yeah.
How to turn it into something where an executive who's not going to have a lot of time to dig in can say, wow, that really validates our strategy, or hey, we're going to go off 2% in the other direction to go after that.
I think a lot of times, what people are seeing is counting. You're doing a lot of counting, like the number of times, or the number of tweets, or the number of posts, or the number of mentions, and counting that isn't necessarily insights. So what you want to be able to do is measure performance. And how do you measure performance, relative to other activity that you're doing in the marketplace, other brands, other regions, et cetera, and really derive insights from data versus just counting. I think that requires sort of a new role in marketing, the data analyst, and that's not necessarily a new role per se, meaning that it's been around for a while, but just to say that I think more importantly, with this mass of communicators and the advent of all of this unstructured data that's now available to us, the data analyst as marketer is going to become increasingly more important in interpreting the data, in doing more than just providing reports on counts, but in fact, understanding what the counts are and defining what that means and presenting that as strategic advice to the
I want to ask a question of our crowd here. How many of you feel as though, if you are in charge of overseeing data and then reporting up how many of you are being asked for insights versus how many of you are being asked for counting? How many, raise your hand if you're being asked to count,
Yeah, most of it.
right? I mean,
Yeah,
we are
tweets,
all
likes.
aspirational about insights, but oftentimes at the very top, they're asking for count.
Right. How many likes did we get?
How many likes did we get, right? And then we want to say back, well, are they the right likers?
Yeah.
Right? Did they mean anything? Right? So I think this whole idea of there being a vacuum in the conversation.
Sometimes
big deal.
sometimes the currencies, what you're counting isn't necessarily relevant. So oftentimes we see stuff like people want to understand how many likes or fans or followers you have, and how much what have you done to increase your follower count or your fan count. And I often say it's sort of irrelevant what your fan count or follower count is. So stop looking at that. Start looking at average discussion length. Start looking at how many conversations are going on in the marketplace and how long those discussions are, because the discussion length, the number of times that somebody interacts with a brand over time with their friends or family, indicates a higher level of passion or satisfaction with that brand versus a single like or a single follower or a single count of something. And so I guess sometimes you have to shift up the discussion from why am I counting this thing to what are we really trying to accomplish? Brand, awareness or brand love, and what are the metrics that matter, and how do we derive insights from the data to understand the metrics that matter?
And within Capella, the joke about we don't suffer from lack of data, we suffer from lack of insights.
Yeah.
That one's been around Capella for as long as I've been there, right? Because we've always been swimming in the data. The people who are the most in demand within our company in terms of the internal talent we have are the people who can take data point A, data point B, data point C, and put it together and tell a meaningful story. And now really even moving into the predictive mode, right? And we're really fortunate. We've got some wicked smart people, but there's not enough of their time to go around. And so, if we could clone them, we would. I just don't, and I think that's the idea of it being a new role. I don't know if it's a new role, but it's new demands on an old role, right? That is not, it's the concept of scaling doesn't even begin to touch it in terms of what we've demanded of that type of analyst role in the past is nothing near what we need it to be in the future. And that's not about Capella's talent, it's not about General Mills' talent, it's not about anyone's talent, it's just about that we're in the Wild West here. We don't really know where we're going with this, and I think that's going to be where we're at for a while. And how do companies manage through that time of figuring out what the right skill set is, and how do you hire enough of them, and the right ones to be able to paint that picture? Because I don't think it's the executive's job. We don't ask executives to do their own accounting. They shouldn't do their own lawyering. Doing their own insights is not there. But I do think that this concept of having people who can get into the data and really paint that picture and tell a story with it is important.
I'd like to respectfully disagree.
Awesome.
I think,
I know.
way like disrespectful. I think if you're an executive, you shouldn't wait to have somebody bring you the insights so that you can go make some decision. Assuming that you've got a reasonably agile leader who's decisive enough to make some decisions in due amount of time, what we're seeing is actually much more strategic conversations about bigger questions given the volume of data that's coming in. So it's not a lack of any insights, it's more about do we have enough of the right data coming in? Are we having constructive conversations about what's there? And more importantly, are we asking the right questions that data is going to help us unlock? And so we're seeing like a step change in conversation about strategy and insights because of the kind of data that we have. And we're actually seeing our executives, and no matter how you define executive, we're actually seeing them engaging in far more strategic conversations because it's new data. They're not looking, in our case, at Nielsen only.
Yeah.
Right.
Now there's a whole bunch of other things that are sort of stimulating a different way to think about the brand, think about the product, think about the consumer, think about the category, think about your media spend, think about the packaging. And so we're seeing a variety of much more strategic conversations, all because we're not having it all served up on a silver platter.
Well, so I don't think we're disagreeing, though. I mean, because I agree with everything you're saying. I think that the concept of asking, the asking of the question is different from the being able to marry together all of the, to be able to tell the story with the data.
I want to put that data in front of an executive not all of it, but
Yeah.
the right data.
The right data.
Because
Yeah.
I want to have a conversation about what we're seeing in that data versus his interpretation of my interpretation
Wow.
of the data.
Okay, fair enough.
And
Yeah.
so, I think that's where you really get a transformative thinking about what to do with your brand or your marketing, et cetera. When you are not swimming in it, but you're dealing with the right stuff. So
Question?